Begin in 1 minute. We will now call the August 8th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Entertain a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Okay, we will only begin the meeting if we have an
Dr. Fraser,
agenda.
you want to go home? We got to make motions.
Yeah, all right. Motion made by Ms. Coates, second by, second by Ms. Green. Are there any questions? Hearing none, we ask that you please cast your vote.
Driver Mac, this is Kate. I'm not into board docs yet, but I vote yes.
Okay, thank you. You just got on. I didn't see you earlier.
I was having trouble, so I'm on.
Okay, got it. Okay, so you will be voting by voice the entire meeting?
No, I'm gonna get into board docs.
Okay.
Give me just a sec.
All right. All right, just note Ms. Darby voted yes to the approval of adoption of the agenda. Okay, that motion carries. Item 2A is public comment. Ms. Waters, Vice Chair, will lead us in our public comments.
Thank you, Reverend Mac. We do have some folks in person signed up today. So 2 minutes per comment, since we are not at our 15. The first person we have coming up is Natrice Henriquez.
Good afternoon, CCSD board members, Mr. Kennedy, and CCSD staff members. My purpose in addressing, by the way, I'm Natrice Henriquez, the principal of Greg Mathis Charter High School. My purpose in addressing you this afternoon is to request building space to house our school. This address reiterates the letter previously sent to you. Greg Mathis Charter High School has been in existence for the past 20 years. Our primary niche is to serve students who are either behaviorally at risk, academically at risk, or both. The school has existed successfully as a CCSD charter school since 2002, but our primary focus now is expansion. Expanding means getting additional building space. Presently, we are paying rent, and that has become extremely burdensome on the school's budget, given that we are a school of approximately 60 students. As you know, funding is generated through EFA and pupil enrollment, and with limited building space, naturally, what comes with that is a limited budget. Therefore, my appeal this afternoon is framed within your expressed need and priority as a district for equity for all our students. Getting additional space for Greg Mathis means expanding the academic curriculum to include additional STEM classes. It also involves us being able to deliver a more robust social and emotional learning program because, as you know, our students come with that deficit. And so being able to offer that service will enhance the whole child as we serve our most vulnerable students. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Next, we have Natalie Johnson.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Natalie Johnson. I serve as the Vice Chair for Greg Mathis Charter High School. On behalf of the Executive Board, as well as Dr. Natrice Henriquez, Ms. Natrice Henriquez, excuse me, I would like to express the concern and the need for additional space for Greg Mathis Charter High School. As Ms. Henriquez stated, we have been in that building for quite some time. The rent is very taxing on our budget. With additional space, we will be able to meet the social and emotional needs of the student. Currently, we are without a cafeteria, without a gym. We would like to be comparable with other schools in Charleston County School District. By doing that, again, we'll meet the social and emotional needs of the students, as well as the money that we are putting towards rent and utilities can actually go towards meeting more of the needs of the student. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Next, we have Gary Mcauliffe.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Mcauliffe, and I've been attending CCSD board meetings since 2021. I have made recommendations to the board, and at the suggestion of Chair Eric Mack, I filed a FOIA request in April asking for information about consultants used by CCSD. I received the CCSD response in June. In my FOIA request, I named the Council of the Greater City Schools, or CGCS, as one of that might be providing consulting services. The FOIA response noted that CGCS is not providing consulting services. I first became aware of CGCS from agenda items and discussions at board meetings. It is evident that CGCS, along with AJ Craybill, is providing consulting services to the CCSD board. From my perspective, these consulting services are definitely linked to the business of CCSD. I will submit a new FOIA request asking for information about the work of the Council of the Greater City Schools. I have one additional comment, and it is directed at the work of the board and its organization and policies with the advice of CGCS. The board is up for election, and all 9 positions will be voted. In addition, the assignment of board members to districts is changing. I recommend that the board conclude its actions, particularly about how it is organized, by making recommendations to the newly elected board. I do not think it is wise to alter policies of the board and ways of conducting business less than 3 months before an election. I recommend that the board conclude its work with recommendations to the newly elected board. Let that new board decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mcauliffe. Next, we have Lydia Gaston.
Hello, citizens, residents. My name is Lydia Gaston, and I'm here to speak on behalf of many parents who cannot be here today. This is a formal request to change the time of the school board meeting to accommodate parents in the Charleston area. What are the steps that need to be taken for this? I'm not sure if you can give me an answer on that now, or is there a petition that needs to be submitted? I'm not sure how this works.
It's not for a question and answer, just for you to state.
Okay. So I'd like to find out how that happens, and I'd like to find out who I can speak to get information on that. Are the written public comments that were submitted before noon read by the board members prior to the meeting each time there's a meeting? If not, when are they read and discussed by the board? In the interest of accountability and transparency, what is the purpose of parents submitting comments if they are not discussed publicly? I've yet to see anything in the bill, during a meeting. And then thirdly, as parents that believe that the decision that should be ours regarding the physical and mental health for children, especially concerning masking and vaccines, I'd like to comment on that. We were promised by both President Biden and Dr. Fauci that if we took a vaccine, we would not get COVID and we would not transmit it. That has been proven false. According to VAERS, which is the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System of the CDC, as well as the Children's Health Defense, and as well as the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation, these COVID vaccines are proving to cause injury, not to everyone, but to some people. And I believe that this should not be forced onto any of our children until such time as there's been further research. So in conclusion, I would like to say that the citizens and residents of Charleston deserve complete accountability and transparency in all decisions made affecting our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gaston. Next, we have Rini Forsberg.
Good afternoon. My name is Rini Forsberg. As a teacher of 28 years in the Charleston County Schools, a large part of my training and experience was that children who come from homes where parents were involved almost always performed better overall. Many attempts have been made to help bridge that gap, such as Head Start and Title I. It is mind-boggling that those of us who are currently concerned about and interested in the education which our children are receiving are labeled right-wing radicals or worse, just totally ignored. School boards are designed to oversee the basic educational needs of all of our children, not to push radical ideology and sexual agendas. And this is happening right here in Charleston County. You should be encouraging citizens and parents to participate in the education of our children. It is unfortunate that this board has fostered a you versus us attitude toward concerned parents and limiting our time to 2 minutes. This is a sad state of affairs, and hopefully in the future, the school board will recognize parental involvement for what it is, a valuable asset for our children, all of our children, and the future of America, which will be in their hands. And what we do and what we teach them and what we say to them and how we interact with each other will make a lasting impression on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Forsberg. We did receive several online public comments. Many of them were delayed comments from the July school board meeting pertaining to agenda items that were discussed at that time. We did have a couple of other comments submitted around early childhood programming and matters related to that. If you get a chance, please review the public comments. And also, just in response to the question that was asked, if you'd like to submit any concerns that you want us to correspond about, please do email us at our email addresses. We're all first name _ last name at charleston.k12.sc.us. That concludes public comments, Reverend Mack.
Thank you, Ms. Waters. At this time now, we'll go to item 2C. There's a presentation by R2 Innovations. Will come and do a presentation for us.
Good afternoon, esteemed board members. I thank you for the opportunity to come in and talk to you about R2P Doors. My name is Tony Deering. I'm the owner and CEO of R2P. R2P being the responsibility to protect. We have a life-saving solution, and we've experienced all too often in the country the tragic events of Sandy Hook, of recently Uvalde, of Parkland, and I firmly believe that we have a solution that can save lives, the lives of students, the lives of faculty members in that critical 10 minutes when the metal detectors, when the camera systems, the data analytics have all fallen by the wayside and people are actually dying. After Sandy Hook, I set on a journey. I have another company here in Charleston, Pegasus Steel, that we've provided life-saving solutions to the US military overseas for the last 16 years. There was a common theme that I heard from the parents. If only there was a barrier, if there was a door that would have stopped Adam Lanza from gaining access into the classroom and murdering those young children. I asked myself the question, why aren't these doors available? Why aren't there protective doors that can stop high velocity assault rifle rounds? And the simple answer was, they are available. They're just way too expensive and way too heavy to be practical in a school environment. I've invested millions of dollars over the last 9 years on a journey to develop a product that can fill that need. The doors that were available at that time weighed in excess of 500 pounds. They could not be opened by children. We have a 260-pound door that has been through test and evaluation through the US federal government. We're currently working with the architect at the Capitol and the Department of State to provide these doors to diplomats and to politicians for their protection. I believe that our students, our faculty members, deserve that same level of protection. I would ask that we go back and look at Sandy Hook, at Parkland, and more recently now at Uvalde, and ask the simple question, would these doors have saved life? The case at Parkland, Nicholas Cruz went into the school. There was ample SROs and law enforcement on the scene at the time. That tragedy could have been mitigated if the people that were tasked with serving and protecting would have done their job. Nicholas Cruz gained access to the building and shot 34 students and faculty members. Never once went into a classroom, but shot 25 victims through classroom doors. I know that there's naysayers that will say, why should we spend money on purchasing these doors if a lot of the buildings have drywall where an active shooter could shoot through the wall? I'm not aware of any situations where somebody has run blindly up and down passageways, just firing rounds into classrooms or into buildings. The cost factor. These doors cost about $6,000. I want you to think about extrapolating that cost over the 25 years that they will be in a classroom. 20 children in a classroom, that's $1 a day to give students and faculty the best chance of survival in that critical 10-minute window. Statistically, from the FBI and the DHS, by far the majority of active shooter events are over within 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Yet law enforcement's average response time from the time of calling 911 is 9 minutes. It is not the fault of law enforcement. We're just expecting law enforcement to react to the impossible. So in conclusion, I would ask that the board seriously consider adopting these doors in the school and give our children and faculty the best chance of survival. Thank you.
Hey, are there any questions from anyone? Mr. Daring, how can a kindergarten, 5 years old, push a door that weighs 260 pounds?
This was one of the key elements that had to be overcome. It's one of the doors that hung in the Charleston County School District. We dedicated the doors as part of the pilot program several years ago. This particular door will be opened by a 5-year-old child. This door was eventually pulled out of the school district. We took it back to our facility and shut the door with high velocity rifle rounds. We shut the windows, we shut the door itself. You folks can see here, unfortunately, the folks out there can't see, that there are 0 penetrations. The same door, in test evaluation, where our doors were shot over 100 times by high velocity rifle rounds, with not one penetration. We have a door that's been through a 1 million cycle slam test without any degradation of the door. We've performed 3 individual 6-man breaches, mechanical breaches, where nobody could break through the door. It's a very simple solution. And yet, because it's not pushing technology buttons, it seems to be washing over a lot of folks' heads. In the 1970s and 1980s, there were a slew of hijackings throughout the world. Airliners were being hijacked. People were being killed. And I have no doubt that there was somebody out there said, why don't we put doors on the cockpit of the aircraft? It took a tragedy like 9/11 and 3,000 people to lose their lives for the government, the federal government, to turn around and mandate that every commercial airliner would have a bulletproof protected door, not more air marshals, but a protected door on the cockpit to stop that kind of tragedy.
Okay.
Let's not have a Beslan. Let's not have another 9/11 in a school before we adopt a technology like this that's readily available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, there being no further questions, item 3A, Student Outcomes and Strategic Education Committee, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, sir. Bring the PowerPoint up, please. So what I'm going to present this afternoon are 3 goals that proposed goals to the school board. And as staff was looking at these goals to present, there would be 3 goals, 1 in reading, 1 in math, and 1 in college and career readiness. And as we took a look at the data associated with how we came up with these goals, we saw that there are significant challenges in the district in terms of student outcomes for a lot of our students in reading, math, and college and career readiness. And so if you take a look across the country, I had school districts that have challenges this way, then invariably they will have those same 3 goals: a goal in reading, a goal in math, and a goal in college and career readiness. And this is what we've proposed to present to the board. This is a result of the student outcome governance training that the board went through at the end of June. The goals are not in the exact format that the coaches recommend. The reason for that is that the staff has not gone through the same training. They will go, or we will, my cabinet will go through the exact same training that board members did. We will do that all day tomorrow, all day workshop. And so then we will be aligning with the formats that you guys are working with. So Mag, if you could, again, if you could skip over to first graph, and I'll come back to this, to the goal itself. What I want to frame here before we get into the specific goals is some of the data that led to the goals. So this graph, this line graph here shows the projected proficiency of SC Ready from 2005 to 2022, so 17-year period. And what we did, we asked the NWA organization, this is the organization that administers the MAP, the Measure of Academic Progress, testing, assessments each year. And we in the district have been using them since 2005. And so the state assessments over that time period have changed. And so what we asked NWA to do is to take a look at the South Carolina State standards in reading as they currently exist, and look at our MAP data over this period of 17 years to determine on a projected basis what would our students have how would they have performed on the South Carolina State Readiness exams. And so what you see here in 2005 on the left-hand side, you can see that in 2005, had 35% of our students reading on grade level. And then there was a steady increase in terms of the percentage of students that are reading on grade level, going up to 2011 from 35% in 2005 to 49% in 2011. That averages 2.3 percentage points per year. And then at 2011, 2012 timeframe, see there was a drop off of that. And then at that point going forward up until now, the line is flat. And what we did internally here, now at NWA, we said, how would kids be performing now had we maintained that 2.3% annual average that we did from 2005 to 2011, had we maintained that until today. So had we done that, we would be roughly at 75% of our children on grade level in reading. And then if we project that further out to where our goal is, our vision of 2027, we would have roughly 85% of our kids reading on grade level. Now, presumably, you can't do exactly what happened in the past. However, those are what the projections show. So what I've done and what we've done, we brought a team of people together, including central office staff, principals, teachers, and others in the district, to begin to explore what we call root causes and systems thinking, to probe the system and see why is it back in 2005 to 2011 timeframe, the district was able to make progress. And then since that time frame, we have not been able to make progress. We don't have all the answers to that yet, but that's part of the work that we're doing. If you flip over to the next slide, Megan, please. So the line graph is average. It shows on average that we have 49% of our students reading on grade level. This 49% is as the 2021 SD Ready scores. But when you disaggregate those numbers and based on race and these other subgroups here, you can see where African Americans are reading on grade level at only 18%. That means that 82% of our African Americans from grades 2 through 8 are reading below grade level. Hispanics, we only have 25% reading on grade level. The English language learners, 23%. Special education, under 10% of our kids are reading on grade level, and pupils in poverty, 25%. Now, we flip back one slide. What we've asked NWA to do, we should have this data pretty soon, to take the subgroups on the table that I just read from and to plot the same graph. And what you will see is that for those subgroups, all those subgroups will be below this particular line here. So that's the reading data that we have. If you could go, Maggie, back to the beginning where it says priority goals. One slide forward, yeah. And so the goal that we are proposing to the board, and these are not in the SMART format, they will be the next iteration. You see it after the cabinet goes to the training that I mentioned a few minutes ago. But over a 5-year period between now and 2027, we're proposing to move the goal to 75% of our kids reading on grade level by 2027. For comparison sake, the highest rated district in the state of South Carolina is Fort Mill up in the upstate. And it is, they have 67.7% of their students reading on grade level. Their poverty rate is roughly 20%. Our poverty rate is roughly 50%. So you can see that this is an aggressive goal. Currently, we are number 9 in the state at the 49%. What we also would do with the goal like this, we will have several subgroups. The subgroups I mentioned a minute ago on race, special needs children, English language learners, and we will also have a focus on a cohort of students that are entering the first grade in 9 days from now, on August the 17th. And in 2027, those first grades will be 5th grade students. And so our focus then will be a high intense focus on that cohort so that when they get to the 5th grade, the number can be greater than 75% of the kids reading on grade level because as they get ready to move into a secondary school, it's important that they be ready for that. On the left-hand side, it shows some of the indicators that we're exploring in terms of trying to track and see how progress is being made. I'll also say that these goals have been coordinated with a number of principals. I think it was Wednesday last week, I presented to all principals, and then later that day, there was a subgroup of principals that's comprised of the superintendent's principal cabinet. We met. Then on Thursday, there was an even smaller group. And so there's, again, teachers have been involved, a number of people, staff have been involved in coming up with the proposed goals. Next slide, please. In one of those meetings, maybe two of those meetings that I just referenced a second ago, one of the principals brought up that if we are going to tackle effectively the students reading on grade level, we really need to go back to kindergarten and beyond, because what she indicated is that we have students coming from kindergarten into first grade, and they're below grade level already. Below their reading skills are very minimum in a lot of cases, and that it's almost impossible for us to catch up. And so what we propose to do in terms of our goals, in addition to having an overall reading goal, is to actually focus on the early learners there. Next slide, please. Please keep going to the next part of the goal. That's the recommendation for reading. Next goal, please. Next slide. For math. So what we propose here in math is for a goal to increase the percentage of students that are taking advanced math in 8th grade, Algebra 1. Increase the percentage of they're taking and the percentage of kids that are successfully completing, not just taking the course, but also successfully completing. And in order to make that happen, there has to be an attention paid to what happens before the 8th grade in math. So you have kids coming through the elementary schools, if they are not prepared when they get from a math standpoint, they're not prepared when they get in the 7th grade, take the eligibility test for advanced math, then they are not going to be ready. Another problem that we're having, and there's a handout also that's not at your desk, that's in board docs. It's a data analysis by a group called Education Resource Strategies. We asked them to take a look at a number of areas in the district from an academic standpoint, one being math. And what the analysis showed, not only were kids not being prepared to take 8th grade math, when you take a look again at the subgroups, the minority students were really not being prepared. And then for the ones, in those instances where we had a significant number, percentage-wise, of minority students, African Americans, who were eligible to take the advanced math, Algebra 1, they were not getting access for various reasons. So you have kids that are not prepared, and so they don't take the course, and you have kids that are prepared, and they don't take the course because they don't get access. So that becomes an equity issue. And so here, again, here are the indicators. The goal itself has not been established yet. We're waiting on the 2022 data from the state, which is embargoed until around September, October timeframe. So we'll come back with specific goals based on the state data for this current year. If you take a look at the next slide, again, it's just the data. This is the same thing that we asked NWA do for reading. We did the same thing with math. You can see the slope. The slope of this line is, although the percentages are different, the slope is the same as reading. So something happened 2005, 2011, we were making progress. And then since then, there's some issues. Next slide. This is the subgroup. So right now, 27.7% of all students are enrolled in Algebra 1. You can see the breakout for the other groups here: Black, African Americans, 11.3%, Hispanic, 15.4%, et cetera. So what we would do also, just like reading, we would have subgroup goals around these student groups. The last slide on math gives information on the handout I mentioned a minute ago that Education Resource Strategy had done the data analysis. I'll point you to the last bullet here. the last sentence here, the key question that was explored as on this analysis is each student enrolled in courses that set them up for success in college and a meaningful career, including equal access to advanced courses. And the data shows that in far too many cases, the answer is no. Next slide, please. And the last goal is around college and career readiness. The intent is to increase the percentage of kids that graduate from in a cohort. So a group of students enter the 9th grade. 4 years later, they either graduated or didn't graduate, but that's a 4-year cohort. Currently, 67.7% of those students are considered college and career ready by these indicators down here on the left at the bottom. Those indicators may or may not be the ones that we go with, but we still have some deliberation on how we handle this. But let me tell you what this 67.7% means, at least to me. So in June, I attended all 11 of our traditional high school graduation. And I stood on the stage on each of one of those graduations, and I shook hand after hand of students coming across the stage. And what this said, and I asked myself every single graduation, these students are coming across this stage from this high school, are they ready for life after K-12? And looking at this, it says 67.7% were, and that means that's a high percentage of students that are not. And so that's the reason why we have this goal in terms of making sure that when our kids graduate from high school, they spent 13 years with us, are they ready to go into meaningful careers? Are they ready to go into college? And when I say go into college, I mean going to college prepared to do college course work, not having to go into college and take remedial high school courses that they should have learned in high school. Because if you come from a high poverty family, you're first generation student in college, the cost is high for everybody, but it's almost insurmountable for a lot of our families. And so if students have to go into college, relearn what they should have learned in high school, they start off in a big deficit. Next slide, please. So these are the metrics or the measures that we're looking at for college and career readiness. And some students will be, we're testing more than one area. Some will test only in a single area. And so we're still working through all the details of that. But again, we would handle this also in subgroup format. And the last section here, the last 2 pages in the presentation simply lays out a little bit of understanding of what each of these assessment measures are. So it's just some information. What questions do you have?
All right, is that the end? Okay, at this time, we've heard a presentation that was set before you. Entertain any questions that you may have at this time. All right, Dr. French.
So I just wanted to mention a couple of things that came up when we talked about this ad hoc committee meeting, that based on the student outcome focused governance framework, then we should really focus on 3 goals. And I'm a little worried about hearing about a lot of sub goals. So it will be important to make sure we stay focused and put our resources in the right place. But also, I really appreciate having this data in such a simple format. It's pretty simple to see where the issues are. And it will definitely be helpful to us in formulating the goals. So I believe the next step would be, and Ms. Herter can help me if I'm remembering it wrong, is we're going to be going out to the community to do some engagement on the data and goals. And then we will be writing them at that point. Is that correct?
That's correct. They're going to make some changes to make sure they're in smart format prior to that, since they are going through their training tomorrow. So we'll have another iteration of this, and then we'll go out for community meetings.
So I have a question.
Yes,
So who is leading these community discussions?
the
Is
board
it
will be.
Board members along with staff?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I believe that
I believe that at least 2 board members at a time. Staff is necessary and CGCS staff to facilitate and to also record the feedback that we get from the community.
We have another ad hoc meeting this week after the staff goes through training to understand the outline of the community meetings. And so we'll be providing more information to the board and the community of how those will be set up.
All right.
Dr. Frazier?
Yes, ma'am. This is for our superintendent. I am so delighted that we have reemphasized reading, but I also like to share with you that maybe about 15 years ago, there was a heavy emphasis on reading, and we had many programs in the district. In fact, the whole department that just focused on increasing reading readiness in the school district. That whole piece was just taken away from the district. I don't know what happened along the line, but we need to take a look at when that happened. And I think that might correlate with why the decrease is so evident in our data. The other issue I'd like to bring up is that education starts at home, especially reading. So that I think you said that one staff member mentioned that we should start at kindergarten. I would like to suggest that we start at home. And we, at one time, and I mentioned that to you, that we did have a program called Mother Read, Father Read, where we actually went into the homes and started working with our parents to assist in them in helping their child read at home. If a child can actually see the parent reading at home, parents start sharing books at home, then I think that that's going to impact our outcomes. So the earlier that we start, I think that that's going to bring about some positive results. Just want to thank you for your work on behalf of this initiative.
I would say on the family piece, I mentioned that we have a number of people involved, principals, all 5 teachers of the year from this year, the teacher of the year, the finalists, and the teacher of the year from last year, plus one other. So 7 teachers, 6 principals, and was that 13, another 21 people spent about 3 weeks ago, a whole day working on this idea of what are some of the root causes, what are some of the system pieces that are preventing progress. And so we came up, it's actually, I won't go through details of how we did it, but it's quite incredible. 2 separate groups came up with the same 3 things that we really need to focus on, in addition to sort of like the academic goals. One of those is high expectations that we have. We need to increase the level of expectation that we have for our students, because if we don't, they won't be able to perform. I met with the principal last Thursday, I think, and not about high expectations, but in the conversation, that's what he said. He said, we got into this school in our district that there was a lot of love for the students, but a lot of low expectation. We need to have that high expectation. The second one was what you're talking about, Dr. Frazier, is family and community, and how do we actually engage the families to make sure that they better understand their focus and reading and whatever the academic areas are. And then the third area was ensuring that we know and engage with the community and families, so that they know for every student coming out of every grade, what is it that student needs to know to be able to be successful in the next grade. So if you're coming out of the 5th grade going into secondary school, what is that you need to know, both not just academically, but socially, and that sort of thing, to make sure that you're on track for the next level.
Thank you for your work on behalf of these students.
Reverend Mack, you have another question?
I just want to, if there's no other board member that
No.
have a question. Yeah, I just want to follow back up on Dr. Frazier's point of reading beginning at home. So in your goals and your scope, is this reading part built as far as into the Head Start program moving forward? And I'm using as an example of trying to get family engaged. Is this part of the scope with the Head Start component?
I think the first phase is for staff to present to the board a proposed set of goals. And so that's what we're doing tonight. And then once the board says these are the set of goals that we want to for the district to go forward with, then we'll get a deeper level of exactly how we're going to do it. So we're not at that point yet, exactly how we're going to do it. We know what the data is showing us. We got problems. We know where the problems are. and we think we know where we want to head in terms of what goals we want. But then after we get, assuming that there's an adoption by the board and the community, then the staff will get into all the details.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any additional questions, comments? Okay, we'll move on to item 3B, and that is just an update on the governance timeline.
Yeah. So the governance timeline is the timeline associated with the student outcome governance change that we're doing. The timeline was approved by the school board on July 18th. There are specific items of actions in the timeline with the specific dates. And so we updated dates on when we staff bring proposed goals to the board. That day is August the 8th, which is today. And then there's a monthly check-in with the coaches, the Council City School coaches that are helping us work through this. And we simply put dates in there, specific dates on when those meetings will occur each month.
The dates actually edited are prior to the deadline in the original timeline. So you'll see going into October or August 31st that he will actually be updating the board chair, the board vice chair on the 29th. Any questions? Reverend Mack?
No.
Okay.
All right.
Any questions on the timeline and the changes? Okay. That wraps up strategic education. Reverend Mack?
Okay, item 4A, audit and finance, Ms. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 4 action items that's coming to you at the board meeting later this month. One of them, I think, we will be asking you to review and approve today. And one information item, if anyone has any questions before the board meeting, let Shauna or me know. Thank you.
Any questions on item 4A? Item 5A, policy DFAC, fund balance.
Hello.
Who's, just 1 second, Dr. French, who's making that?
It's coming from me.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I thought as policy liaison, I would introduce it, but that's all right. It did come from staff. So thank you, Ms. Williams. You can go ahead.
Correct. Yeah, Dr. French is the policy liaison. So go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. French. So what this is a revision to our existing fund balance policy. It doesn't change the parameters in which we operate the fund balance. It further clarifies and specifies when we can classify the funds as stabilization. And so the yellow highlighted text that you guys have in front of you, it explains when we can move funds in fund balance to stabilization. Stabilization would be a one-time non-recurring expense used to stabilize the district financially. And so our external auditors actually reviewed this with us, and they suggested that we put the added language in the document in our policy. Any questions?
Okay, Dr. French.
All right. If there are no further questions, then I would ask if there's a motion to forward these policy changes.
You can make the motion.
Okay.
Liaison.
All right, then I will do so. I move to forward the proposed policy changes to the next regular scheduled board meeting for approval of first reading.
Second.
And any more discussion? Then let's go ahead and vote.
Oh, sorry.
I vote yes.
She voted yes.
Thank you. The motion passes, and since there are no nays, I believe this would go onto the consent agenda at the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Okay, item 6A, other business, Mr. Barowie.
Yes, sir. I could ask Mr. Reidenbach to the podium. Real quick, Mr. Reidenbach is going to provide you all an overview of our current security posture. We're extremely proud of what this district has done. Michael and his team working with our schools. I really want him to spend an appropriate amount of time providing you a level of comfort of what has been done and what is in place. I'll caution that we don't get down to the school level discussion in the interest of protecting individual schools. Certainly, if you have questions offline individually, we can talk about individual schools. And then the remainder of his presentation, he'll talk about options to enhance security, different technologies, different physical barriers, other things that are out on the market, providing you some information that could be considered as we look ahead, especially as we look ahead to developing the next fixed cost of ownership budget, which would come to you in the February timeframe. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Reidenbach.
It's also good to note too that Mike was one of the 4 finalists, I believe, at the national.
He was one of 4 finalists for Campus Security Manager of the Year. In our eyes, he is number 1, although those that voted didn't think he was number 1.
Yeah.
So it is a very high honor considering that's all campuses across the country, including higher ed as well. So not just K-12 programs.
Yeah.
And I will add, because if I don't, he will. It is representative of the entire organization in security and emergency management. He runs the show, but we're blessed with a phenomenal team there that he's assembled.
Okay. All right. Now that you have been exploded there, now you go ahead and get your
Thoroughly
presentation.
embarrassed. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir. Now, I appreciate Mr. Roy mentioning the team. You'll get an opportunity to see some of our team members and photos, and certainly they're the ones who do so much of this work every day and dedicate so much of their lives to keeping our schools safe, and we're so appreciative of their efforts. So Mr. Broy, Mr. Kennedy, and Reverend Mack, members of the board, thank you for having me back again here today to provide an overview of our existing school security program and then move into a discussion about potential enhancements to be considered in the future. And so if you recall, a couple of months ago, I provided a brief overview about our school security program and talked about the 4 main categories or pillars that really most of our programs fall within. And it's important to note that what we're talking about here today is our school security program, and there's so much more that makes up our overall school safety program. So if we think about issues you might associate with other departments, like restorative practices and school climate and culture and positive behavior interventions and supports. All of those things really come together with the things we'll talk about in the security program to create that overall school safety program. But as a reminder of those 4 categories we'll hit on, the first of which is emergency planning, drills and training, then talk about physical security measures, threat reporting, detection and assessment, and then school resource officers and security personnel. So we'll dive right in and talk about our emergency planning. And last August, we were fortunate to be able to roll out a brand new all hazards emergency operations plan that was really several years in the making. We've had an emergency plan in this district, but we really wanted to take a fresh look at that plan. And so over the course, again, of many years, we went section by section, met with individual groups and stakeholders, including public safety, to review each section to say, how can we continue to enhance what we're planning for? And then we also reformatted the document to align with the standards put forward by the U.S. Department of Education for creating high quality school emergency plans. We cannot adequately respond to a situation unless we've contemplated it and established a plan for it. And so this gives us a good framework to work from. When we think about response, particularly in a school crisis, public safety involvement is critical, and establishing those partnerships on a daily basis is something that our team works on very heavily. Today, we're thankful to have Chief Mark Arnold from the Mount Pleasant Police Department. He's one of our incredible partners that works with us and his team to keep our schools safe. We're thankful for him being here today. A plan does you no good if nobody knows what their role is in it. what is our role during a crisis? So we have to have training. So all new staff members that come to work in the school district receive training from our office as a part of their new hire orientation. We also provide recurring training at least twice per year for all existing staff members. And then we have annual drill requirements. We want to practice that response. So this past year, last school year, we conducted over 1,120 emergency drills within our schools and topics and to exercise our plans for armed intruder, fire, tornado, and earthquake. In addition to those drills, we also want to conduct exercises outside of those drills. So a tabletop exercise is a great thing that we can do to sit around a table to present a scenario to the groups and then talk through what our response would be. You see that picture on the bottom of the slide is a picture from our walkthrough reunification exercise, which took place within the past 2 weeks at the North Charleston Coliseum, where we invited members of our school administration and district staff to come and walk through an actual student reunification. So we set up the complex as we would, as is called for in our emergency operations plan. And then up top, you see Tim Huey working with our video services folks doing a live broadcast out to district staff from the Cooper River CAS on a live security training as well. When we look at the program that we've built, a key part of that is learning lessons. And so we look at critical incidents that have happened across the country, not only in active shooters, which tend to dominate the school security discussion, but in a variety of other school safety incidents that happen to learn both what went well and what did not go well. And we take that type of approach with incidents that happen inside of CCSD as well. So a prime example is Angel Oak Elementary last school year had a large fire behind the school in a wooded area off campus. We got an immediate evacuation order from the fire marshal, so the whole school had to walk down Chisholm Road to get off campus. And so they headed down to St. John's High, and we did a reunification there at St. John's. And so we got together with the school administration and the fire and the sheriff's office and all the folks who responded to that situation to say what went well and what we've improved on for next time, so that we can take those lessons to other school administrators, but then also make adjustments to our plan as well. The next pillar we look at is in the area of physical security measures. And we use a concept called defense in depth, which is intended to create various layers of security on the campus. And those layers of security are intended to do three main things for us. When we look at a hazard, we want them to help us better deter the hazard, better detect the hazard, or delay it from becoming an issue for us. And so, of course, we talk about that list of things there: fences, vehicle barriers, cameras, electronic access controls, closed and locked doors, including those in our classrooms, and even layering protocols on top of that. So making sure that everybody's wearing ID badges on campus so that we can scan to see who doesn't belong, to more quickly identify any trespassers that are on campus. The next main category is in the area of threat reporting, detection, and assessment. And so a key part of being able to successfully intervene before we see a major school tragedy like a shooting is early identification and response and intervention. And so we want to create ways for us to be able to identify these issues as early as possible. And so we do that by establishing anonymous reporting systems, having toll-free hotlines. We utilize an automated system that monitors student network activity, that looks for threatening words and messages and images of guns and those sorts of things that will allow us to get a sense that something may be happening and intervene quickly. We do that 24 hours a day. You see pictured below members of our security operations center team. They work 24/7 at our Bridgeview campus, watching over the district. And when we get a call about something happening 24 hours a day, then our on-call security administrator is involved, and we reach out directly to our law enforcement partners and get to work on that regardless of the time of day. When this involves a student, we have a formalized threat assessment process that's used in our schools. It's largely driven by our mental health professionals, our school psychologists, school counselors, to do those interviews of students. And remember, we're looking not to determine if they've made a threat, because usually it's very clear they have made a threat, but whether the student in fact poses a threat. And based on the level of risk associated with that student, we determine what interventions are necessary and put those interventions in place to try to get that person off of a path toward intended violence. And that could be a threat toward themselves or others. And the final main category we look at is in the area of school resource officers. And so we're incredibly thankful to our public safety partners, and those are the four listed there that provide SROs to our schools every day. We'll talk about SRO staffing a little bit more in a few more slides, but in addition to SROs, we also have folks from a team called the School Security Response Team in the city of Charleston that just randomly patrols schools. We will layer off duty officers on top of the SROs and the SSRT because not every school has a full-time SRO. We also have members of our district security team that are working with our schools every day to help not only handle situations that happen, but to do random and proactive security checks. We did over 398 school security assessments in our schools last year. And looking at our 24-hour-a-day numbers, we did over 6,000 campus security checks at our schools last year. We also have random searches that are conducted in our high schools by our search and safety team, which was a program that was started after the Parkland tragedy. And last year they conducted 172 random searches in our high schools last year, finding 236 prohibited items, 32 of which were weapons inside the schools. None of those were firearms, but typically we're looking at mace canisters, tasers, small pocket knives, things of that nature. So as Mr. Burley mentioned, we wanted to start with where we are, the program that we currently have in place, and to really highlight that this program was built over many years. Even long before most of us were here at the district, much work has gone into building this program, and many lessons have been taken from school tragedies over the years. But there's always room to grow. And after a situation like Uvalde happens, people are often asking, what's next? What are some additional things we can do to try to enhance our security program? And so we had a similar discussion with the board in 2018 after Parkland, where we really just presented some ideas, some potential enhancements, many of which came from ideas that board members had, that community members have brought forward, that our teachers and staff had brought forward, really just to present them as options and to solicit feedback as we prepare plans for the future. So to kind of run through this list of options, the first one is the area of library door security. Libraries are really handled differently across the district, and that largely depends on the volume of students that visit the libraries on a day-to-day basis. If you think of a large school with a lot of kids, they're coming in and out of the library all day long, while that librarian is also working with classes within that library space. So it's really hard to control the security of that door. And we mitigate that by really assigning lockdown spaces that are in adjacent locations to the library. But what this proposal would allow us to do is to install electronic locks on every library door so that the librarian has more control over whether the door is locked or unlocked, and has the better ability to lock or unlock the door quickly based on the circumstances. We're currently piloting equipment like this in one of our schools that includes a light indicator to show whether the door is locked or unlocked, so the librarian can very clearly see the state of the door. But this would allow us to add an additional layer in this student space that's used very heavily during the day, and provide an additional layer of security for our teacher librarians. And the next enhancement, we see public safety radio systems, radio enhancement systems, otherwise known as BDAs, bidirectional amplifiers. An analysis of our district buildings has shown that many of them lack sufficient radio coverage inside the buildings for public safety radios. So when a test is done inside the school buildings, we find that police, fire, and EMS radios may not be able to adequately communicate with each other or with external resources when they're inside of the school building. And so there's a system called a BDA that's installed in the building that allows those signals to be captured from inside and enhanced outside the building. This is currently a requirement in all new construction. It's a code requirement. And it's also a requirement for us to do retroactively, but it's not enforced unless there's a major renovations. And so we're trying to establish a timeline to be able to accomplish these enhancements in all of our buildings to give public safety the ability to communicate effectively during a crisis response, because we know communication is often cited as one of the main issues. So looking district-wide, about $2.5 million in a one-time cost to install those systems across all of the schools that need it. Of note, we were able to add about $300,000 to our FCO budget this year to start addressing these needs. So that will give us a start, but as you can see, it'll take us a while if we continue on that route. The next enhancement is in the area of school security staffing. And so to provide some history, back in 2018, when we had this discussion with the board after Parkland, the board endorsed a program for the district to request school resource officers at all schools under the board's governance. So we engage in conversations with our law enforcement partners to get SROs, to request SROs in all of our schools, elementary, middle, and high. And there was a time over the past, since 2018, that we were able to achieve pretty much full staffing inside of those schools. Over the course of time, though, law enforcement has continued to see recruitment challenges. There have been situations that have caused them to lose officers through attrition and other situations. And so it's become a lot more difficult for them to fill all of the billets that we've requested of them. And so the board has set aside funding for us to pay for our allocation for every school. But the law enforcement agencies aren't able to put forward officers because they're just not there. So it's not a funding issue. It really is a resource issue. And so we do have the town of Mount Pleasant, and largely to Chief Arnold's efforts and town council, they have all of their schools filled full-time with a full-time SRO. Those in unincorporated Charleston County have all of their schools filled. In the city of Charleston, only about half of the elementary schools have a full-time SRO, while the other half are served by that school security response team who just does the random patrols. In the city of North Charleston, we also have vacancies in the elementary schools that they try to cover through officers checking in on a random basis. But we do not have that full-time security presence on all of our campuses. And so what this would allow us to do, this proposal would allow us to fill that gap currently caused by those SRO vacancies with the use of private security. And so we do have funding, again, allocated to the SRO program, to those individual SRO billets. Private security costs a little bit more than that, but we would be able to move forward with this if this seemed like the best option to pursue. Of course, the pros is this would help us answer the call of many of our school administrators who are asking for help in this area. When there is a parent disturbance, when there is a trespasser, when there is other type of situation on the campus, right now it's falling to our school administrators to deal with initially until a police officer arrives. And so this would allow somebody else to be there who this is their profession and their job to respond to those situations. It would help us enhance that and provide another layer on top of the SRO program. Of course, the cons is the police agencies are having a problem with recruitment. We may find that we have the same challenges, but we may also be going after a different pool of individuals. So we might be looking for somebody who really likes the idea of a school year calendar and only wants to work a school year. Somebody who may be retired from law enforcement who is looking just for a second career. And so we may have some better luck in that area, but we could still see some recruitment challenges. And of course, another con listed there is armed security have less training than a school resource officer, but we could try to overcome that by recruiting former police officers, and then also adding training on top of what's already required of them by state law. All right, the next option is a threat assessment support team. I mentioned our threat assessments are currently conducted at the school level, and typically the interview is led by somebody on the mental health side, but there's a larger team that then takes a look at the findings from the interview to determine the level of threat and what kind of interventions may need to be put in place. And so this proposal would create a district level support team for threat assessments, because I don't know what to say, practice makes perfect. And if you're at an individual school, chances are you probably don't do threat assessments on a daily basis. But when we look at district wide, we typically have threat assessments going on fairly regularly. And so having a team that gets that experience and that breadth of knowledge to dealing with more threat assessments can help and really be a resource for school teams to make sure that good decisions are being made and to really also increase their level of confidence. We've seen school shootings across the country where there may have been an opportunity with a threat assessment to be done, or for a team to intervene, that a decision may have been made incorrectly or that could have been better. And again, a district team kind of creating that consistency across all school teams can really help ensure we're making the best decisions, but also enhance our case management abilities. So sustained interventions are really important to ensure that students stay truly do veer off that path toward violence. And so these additional resources would help with that sustained case management as well. Next is something called storeroom function locks. So when we look at our classrooms, they currently have something that's called a classroom security function lock. And I'm getting real technical here, so we get a good crash course on door locks. So those door locks can lock and unlock. So if I use my key to go in the classroom, I can physically unlock that door and it will stay in the unlocked state. What we're doing is in new construction, we're starting to install a lock called a storeroom function lock, which basically you cannot unlock it. You can use a key to get into the room, but you cannot physically leave the door in an unlocked state. Because a lot of times when we do our security assessments, when we go around and do find an unlocked classroom door, the teacher or the staff member in the space says, "Oh, I didn't realize it was unlocked. I didn't realize I just did it wrong when I used the key." And so we want to try to do everything we can to eliminate that human error element. And so this just takes away that possibility that somebody may inadvertently leave a classroom door unlocked. And again, we're doing that in new construction and renovations, but this would be what it would cost to do a wholesale retrofit of all classroom door locks across the school district. Next is a topic that gets a lot of discussion in the community. We've talked about it with the board before. And a few weeks ago, we provided all of you with an analysis of what it would take to implement a full-time weapons screening program in our high schools. And because it was getting so much discussion, we wanted to do an analysis just to see if we were to do this, what would it take both from a resources perspective and a personnel perspective. And so you can see at one-time cost a little over $1 million and about a $3 million recurring cost in staffing would allow us to do full-time weapon screening at all of our high schools every day, all day. And that would be every day, all day during the school day, that is. We would purchase weapon screening devices, so not traditional metal detectors, but detectors that are intended only to detect guns or what they call weapons of mass casualty from coming into a school. Which of course would increase our likelihood in detecting contraband and perhaps be a deterrence to folks bringing weapons to school. But of course, like all of these, there are potential gaps. We do have doors that would be unattended that a student could open to let somebody else in, or even after school activities could provide somebody the opportunity to stash a weapon. But either way, it is a layer. Again, all of these things we try to put together to create a comprehensive program as opposed to just letting one solve the problem. And so it would be an additional layer of security. The next area is with electronic access control improvements. And this really has two parts. One is to upgrade our access control hardware, our door controllers. So because that system has been in place over time, there are certain controllers that we use that have reached end of life or are no longer manufactured. And so upgrading it to the latest model would give us the maximize our functionality when it comes to feature sets. And one of those key feature sets that we would tack onto this as well would be to install door position switches on all of our exterior doors. And what those door position switches would do would sound an alarm or provide a notice anytime a door was propped open. And so obviously if somebody comes along and uses a rock to prop the door open, or even somebody stands there with the door open, knowing that that's happening would be a huge benefit to us to be able to respond to address that security vulnerability. A con, or something that system still will not address, are the doors that are closed but not latched. So we have seen that happen here and in other situations across the country where a door may be closed. It looks just like that. It's seated inside the door frame, but it's just not quite latched at the strike part of the door. And so we would still have that gap potentially with this system, but we would certainly capture if a door was completely propped open. The next one has to do with bus cameras, which we currently have cameras in our school buses. But this funding will allow us to upgrade those cameras to a more modern digital high resolution system, but probably more importantly, give us the ability to remotely monitor those cameras. So right now, wherever I have an internet connection, I can log into our camera system and view our cameras at any of our schools. We can view those school cameras remotely. We currently cannot do that on our buses. And so when we get information about an active incident happening on a bus right now, we have to try to get information via our radio in order to guide the bus driver on exactly what to do. And being able to log in to see what's happening would significantly enhance our ability to give better advice and better guide drivers on how to properly respond, but then also give public safety some real-time intelligence for them to determine what their response needs to look like as well. Next slide, please. We talked about ballistic rated doors earlier. Mr. Deering and his team provided some information on this. And this is certainly something that would provide some significant benefit in the event of an armed intruder inside the school who is firing from inside of a corridor. And so when we look at better fortifying our classrooms and the spaces that we lock down, a ballistic rated door would certainly increase the chances for survivability if there is an active shooter inside of the corridor. So that's certainly a benefit to that. Some things to consider that we may have to look at if we move forward with that would be the remaining vulnerabilities that exist. So if there's a window beside the classroom door, if there is that drywall or exterior windows, in order to realize the full protection of the door, would we need to address those elements as well? And then in our discussions and feedback from our public safety partners, we also would want to have further discussions about how to address a different type of threat. So if there was a hostage situation inside of the room, or if that shooter proceeded into the room because the door had been left unlocked or open and closed the door behind them, how would we effectively respond inside of the classrooms? And there may certainly be response options to build in that would address those concerns. That would be something to investigate further as we pursue this option. And then finally, emergency notification and panic systems. So right now we largely rely on our public address system to get the word out about an emergency happening on campus. So we make an announcement over our PA, but emergency notification systems are becoming more prevalent, and they help us expand the reach of our PA by leveraging additional systems. So imagine being in this room and having an emergency message pop up on the screen in front of the classroom. Or imagine it coming across your cell phone, or for the radio users, as an automated message that comes across both the school and the district level radio. So these systems allow teachers to initiate alerts via an app on their phone, via a desktop application that's always up to more quickly alert individuals on campus of a situation. And so that's obviously a benefit. It would help us to ensure that those with visual or hearing impairments can receive one of those messages firsthand. So if we have a public address announcement, we know that we're not reaching all of our population with disabilities. We're having to rely on aides or other individuals at the school to help with that notification. But this technology would help us bridge that gap. So we end with a summary of all of those enhancements. And so it was a lot of information to present all at one time. But know that our team continues and always talks to our stakeholder groups. We're always listening to administrators and staff and parents, our public safety partners, and of course, you all, to determine what's the best course of action and continuing to enhance our school security program. Our hazards are always changing. What are our hazards today may not be our hazards tomorrow. And even when we look at an active shooter, for example, the tactics used today may not be the tactics used tomorrow. And so we always have to evolve with those and continue to enhance our practices. So this will always be a discussion, will always be an ongoing discussion with all of us. And we don't want it to consume us and create fear in our minds when we walk into our schools. On the contrary, we want it to build good habits and to maintain safety is something that's in the forefront of our mind, so that we just build that culture within our schools every day that knows we know our doors are locked. We know that we're going to check behind them. We know that we're going to wear ID badges, do all these things every day just to create that culture. So it's second nature to us, but ultimately enhances the safety of the campus. So I appreciate again the opportunity. Look forward to your questions and comments.
All right, thanks, Mike, for this security update. Question, is there something, a pamphlet of some sort that we give to students or to parents that they can have readily at their fingertips? I know a lot of this may be included on the actual web itself, or but is there something physically that they can have that may give important numbers, website to go to, or any safety measures just to help them understand the communication as far as a safety or a threat that may occur?
Absolutely. So we have over time put out documentation to parents through call outs. We did it a couple of times toward the end of last year. we have in our office, we have an overview document. It's a 2-page PDF that kind of summarizes all the things that I just discussed. And we integrated that document in with information provided by psychological and intervention services and guidance and alternative programs to create an overall school safety pamphlet that we sent out to parents, where it had links to the various web resources, as well as information like our toll-free hotline number, reporting system, and things of that nature.
Okay. All right. And Ms. Hedrick?
I have a couple questions, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just going to go through. So with the bus cameras, since we contract out with bus companies, how would that work with the expense?
So we currently, it's my understanding, we own the equipment on the buses. So our district radios and our cameras are district assets that we just install on their buses.
Okay. And then with the doors, do these doors have the storeroom locks on them? The ballistic doors?
I don't think this, we would probably go through if we move forward with a purchase of speccing with the hardware that would go in them. That would be my understanding.
And do these doors have warranties on them? I have questions for, I guess, him as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The doors are warranted, and the hardware can be spec'd out by the end user, which would be the school district themselves. So technology is always advancing, but we would look at meeting the requirements of the standard.
And would that be an additional cost to the 6,000 per door? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Green.
Michael, thank you as always for this comprehensive report. And I noticed you didn't give us a a total on the dollars on the summary sheet.
That's the financial
But
audit.
I was trying to count it up. So, but talk to us a little bit about if you were going the route of hiring SROs that were, for instance, retired police officers or security guards. Talk to us about the training for those officers versus because now, of course, they come to us with the training from the police department. How does that work? What kind of training would they have?
Sure. So when we look at this, the state requirement, so all security officers in South Carolina are credentialed by SLED, and they have to get a state mandated training through SLED certified instructors. And the training received in total, when you add on the training from that our security vendor adds on top, is really probably about 40 hours. So we try to fill that gap by requiring individuals to have different career experiences. So to bring with them that law enforcement experience, military experience, corrections experience, similar, most of the folks in our office have come from law enforcement backgrounds. And so we bring that training with us. And so when you compare that to a police officer who has to go to the State Criminal Justice Academy for 12 weeks, plus they get many weeks of field training before they're cut loose to work on their own. It is a gap, which is why we would try to put those career requirements or that experience requirement in place.
Okay, thank you. Also, I think it would be helpful to see a prioritized list of your department's wants. What you think really needs to be done and in what order.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and I think we can certainly do that. And a large part of the creation of that is soliciting feedback. And so any feedback you have either today or even after today, we'd love to hear.
Okay.
Ms. Waters.
Thank you. And Ms. Green did, that last one was one of mine. So, but I guess we have to say something for you to do that. But just in trying to figure out, I do have two additional questions. One, are there any trainings for students ever throughout the year? I heard you mention staff getting training, but what about students who need to know what to do?
So typically the drills are meant to accomplish the student training requirement. We started pushing out a supplemental video that teachers can show to students to go along with the active shooter drill, for example. But for the most part, drills are the way that we train our students.
Okay. And then how often do you drill?
It depends on the hazard. So fire drills are monthly, armed intruder drills are once per semester, tornado once a year, and earthquake once a year.
Okay. And then also just thinking about some of these things you mentioned, or maybe it was the gentleman when he spoke about drywall. What percentage of our buildings have drywall versus the concrete? I know it's kind of old school.
Yeah, I think that's something we still have to analyze.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Yeah, I would love to see a prioritization in your mind, because what I'm at this point, I'm not speaking for everybody, but I'm learning about all of this. It would really help just for some sort of recommendation personally, and maybe I can just have a one-off with you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Reverend Mack, I have a question.
Ms. Pitts.
So when you're talking about the electronic access control improvements, you're talking about those alarms when the two doors don't meet.
Yes, ma'am.
Can they not be calibrated so that when bump bars are not fully extended and haven't latched, can they not be calibrated to catch that?
Yeah.
Or
So
are you referencing the fact that you have a fully closed door with a bump bar that has not been pulled back out?
right. So they're kind of two different technologies. One is a door position switch, which is basically a magnetic contact that sits in the door frame, and it looks for the magnet on top of the door to connect with it to show that it's closed. And there are door position switches that have very high settings where you can set it to really detect if it's off a little bit. The other type is the much more expensive kind, which we did not price here, is we can actually do latch bolt monitoring.
Right.
So when the latch is not completely out,
This ain't that.
this isn't that, because that would be a lot more expensive.
But so then it leads me to my second question with the storeroom function locks. Can we get bump bars away from our non-primary entrance and exit doors and use these storeroom lock systems to where internally a key would have to be in the door to open it, as opposed to someone hitting that bump bar?
It's all about the fire code typically dictates where we have those panic bars or push bars.
Okay, I forgot about that. Okay,
Yeah.
so that'd be the fire code. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Ms. Hedrick.
Just one more question. Similar to how we did the ESSER funding and sending the survey out to the community, when you put these in priority order, would we be able to do the same thing to get feedback from the community on what their priority is?
I think that's something that we could look at. One tactic we used after Parkland was, and the same holds true for after Uvalde, is we heard from a lot of parents.
Yep.
And so we actually took the opportunity to all the parents who came either to board meetings to speak about safety or reached out directly to us. We brought all of them together in one place.
Yep.
And had a discussion to say, here are some ideas. What do you think about them? And so that's certainly an option we could explore.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Dr. Frazier.
Mr. Redenbach, I conducted this survey, and we've talked about you looking at the results of that survey of 3 high schools. 2 of them were here in Charleston County and 1 was in another county. And the main concerns that some of our staff members had was inappropriate use of student concern specialists. And at some point in time, could you address that? Because some of our schools now are using them as police officers. And then the second is some of the staff members were saying that they're unable to use their telephones, their private cell phones, to communicate with outside sources. And then third, could you address the kind of training you're conducting with our staff so that they'll know what to do in a case of emergency?
Yes, ma'am. So typically we will provide classroom instruction. So we'll do a presentation to staff members and go through a variety of hazards. We'll talk about different scenarios. We'll provide schools with scenarios they can use with their staff and staff meetings. And we have a program called the First 5, which is provides a quick video prompt of a scenario and then asks staff to talk about it. And it's intended to last no more than 5 minutes. The discussion is really just to get staff thinking about the various options because we can train to one particular emergency, but we know there's always things that'll happen that may cause that response to not be appropriate in what we're seeing here, right? So if they come in this door, whether they come in that door or that door, our response may be different. And so we're trying to build capacity to make a decision based on an assessment we're making. And so by going through those various scenarios, we can do that and get staff thinking about things ahead of time. And we even in our training encourage folks, think about where you are right now. If it's sitting in your classroom, what if this happens? What would you do right now? Again, to get folks thinking about it ahead of time. So we've done that both in recorded format. We've done that in live sessions. So we will provide live video sessions where staff can log in at a certain time. That way they can chat with us during the session or send us messages during the session so we can answer the questions as they have them. And of course, our staff, Jennifer Backman is one of the deputy directors in our office who's responsible for North Charleston. So she'll work with the North Charleston principals and go out and do staff meetings upon request to talk to staff about particular topics.
And what about unable to use telephones in the building?
Yeah, so from a cell phone reception perspective, is that the concern?
Yes.
So I'm not sure where we stand on being able to connect to Wi-Fi through those devices, but that's certainly a potential option to be able to log into a guest network or something to that effect on your cell phone, just to at least to get that internet connectivity. Unfortunately, being able to get, much like the public safety radio reception issue, that's the same issue across the different cell phone providers as well. And it's just the nature of the construction of commercial buildings, unfortunately.
And student concern specialists.
Yes, ma'am. So there's been a lot of discussion recently about the job descriptions for student concern specialists. And so we've been having discussions about the need to reevaluate those job descriptions and again, look at how they're being used and even allocated across the district.
Okay. Being no further questions. I'm
Reverend
sorry.
Mack.
Ms. Darby had a question. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
thanks. No, that's okay.
You're not physically in the room, so I can't really.
I know. I wish I wasn't on vacation. No, I'm just kidding. I'm still eating Reese's while I'm with you guys. Mr. Reidenbach, thank you. This has been great information. I think a lot for us to process. One question I have about the security guards, and I know the commitment the board made to having SROs in every school, and I think based on recent events that we've seen, how important that is. This may just be your opinion, but if the other, North Charleston, the city of Charleston were able to find and hire SROs, would they be putting an SRO in every school, or do they just have a different philosophy than the county and Mount Pleasant who are doing it that way?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to, for the most part, if resources and people were not a problem, they would have one in every school.
Okay, great.
Yeah, unfortunately, when you look at the city of Charleston, for example, their SSRT covers approximately 50 some odd schools because they have a lot of private schools, charter schools in their city beyond just what we have under the board's governance. And so they're just having to maximize their resources as efficiently as they can, especially when you look at the other challenges that, the crime issues or other calls for law enforcement assistance and DUI and traffic enforcement and other areas. They're just having to be as efficient as they can.
Yeah, we all know how hard it is to hire people right now. So, okay, that's good information. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Reichenbach. No further
Thank you.
questions.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Michael. Great
All right.
report.
All right, item 6B is the Greg Mathis Charter High School requests for space. We've heard from the principal and vice chair of the board requesting assistance with space with any availability within the district. Mr. Baroy, can you share with the board of any potential space that's readily available?
Sir, two of the schools are listed in the board document. That was information provided in a board update. That was detailed analysis that happened to be done in those two schools last year. One was Burke High School. The other was the Center for Advanced Studies in North Charleston, the Cooper River. Each of those schools had 5 and 7 rooms that had been unassigned at that time. So those are the only two schools that there's been a deep dive analysis of, and it just happened to have been done for other reasons. If that is to be done at other schools, my request for the board would be, does it include elementary, middle, and high, or just high schools? That level of analysis or that quantity makes a big difference. The second question would be, can it wait until the analysis comes in from our schools? It's due in every November. I can certainly use last year's information like I did for those other two schools, but that information comes to us by school every year in November, a room by room analysis showing teachers assigned to a room with a class. And so that would be the second question I would have. If the board wants us to do that analysis, the most current analysis would be in the November timeframe. The third thing I would just like to point out is that the charter schools that are in our spaces now do pay utilities, do pay custodial, and do pay for maintenance. So none of the charter schools that are utilizing our facilities are on a free ride. I just wanted to point that out. It's based on the square footage of space that they actually use. We come up with a cost, and that is a billable item that they provide at that point. So that's the update I have right now. Certainly awaiting further direction from the board.
So you said the current assessment that you have done is Burke High School, and what was the other one? I'm sorry.
The Cooper River Center for Advanced Studies, the CAS in North Charleston.
Got it. Okay. All right. Ms. Waters.
I do. So I had two questions. I would be curious to know from the principal of Greg Mathis, what timeline you all are on, since you mentioned it's such a budgetary constraint.
So practically, we would be willing to sit out this year in our current building space, primarily because it would not be practical to move a school in the middle of a school year.
Sure.
However, I need to mention that I'm actually willing to share space. So even though our request increases our class size by 50% of what we have now, the idea is, as I said before, growth, long-term growth to serve more kids. And also the fact that if we're able to get into an existing approved space, and of course, that would be at the district's discretion, whether it's a middle school or a high school, we'll be willing to share that space.
Okay, and then I did have one more question. The services that you provide, and I don't know if you know or if someone in the district knows, whether those are offered at any other CCSD schools.
In terms of serving at-risk students?
Yes, the types of students, yes.
Clark would be the closest. Clark Academy would be the closest, well, in terms of design and service. However, in terms of having a full campus of at-risk students, no.
Mm-hmm. And how do your students come to you? Like, how do you identify?
Great question. So our students come to us through referrals, not placement, by other high schools. So we go through, well, of course, we're a school of choice. So parents choose to send their students there for the advantage of prescriptive academic interventions, as well as behavioral intervention. In addition, we go through referrals from other principals, guidance counselors, behavior interventionists, and we act as that intermediary between expulsion and success for the students.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
All right, Ms. Hederick, and then Ms. Green, then Ms. Coates.
I have a question for you too. I'm assuming with the current budgetary restraints that you don't have the funding to purchase your own building?
No, we do not.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Green?
Don't go anywhere yet. In terms of your enrollment capacity, do you turn away students because of limited capacity right now?
Because of my personal philosophy for serving at-risk students, I do not turn away students. However, what we have done ever since, even before COVID, I have resorted to a model of blended learning. So prior to 2020, when COVID became that mitigating factor that caused us to be creative, we have since then been serving students on a blended model. And essentially what we use is the remote and station rotation models to serve those students. So some students, or blended students, they come in at some point each week for direct instruction and for mandatory assessments using the e-curriculum that we use. So to answer your question directly, no, I do not turn back students at this point, but those students who I have on remote can better be served in the building. But because of limited capacity, I'm not able to do so effectively and safely.
So you will be able to share with staff when they start to do the analysis, your thoughts about the request for the additional space that you think you need.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Coates.
So I have one question for you, ma'am. What is your charter capacity?
The charter capacity is 85 currently, but that was written with the present building.
Right, which brings me to my question. We've got a couple of ways that this can happen. One is, it is striking that there's only 2 district-sponsored charter schools currently not in buildings. It doesn't seem to be hard that we could figure out through a capital program to sweep something in, but that's a longer-term solution. If the shorter-term solution is to not increase your charter and find space, would that help? Or are you wanting both of those things to happen at the same time? CCSD board approve an increase in your charter for the number of students and space, but what if we could find space for the current charter? You see where I'm headed?
Yes, I see where you're heading, and practically, we would not be greedy to say you would have to do both. But as I said before, we are eyeing growth as our primary goal. And if for now, you can find a space to accommodate us at our present size, that would be also acceptable. The primary focus, ladies and gentlemen, is to be able to leverage service with quality for all our kids, and being able to bring everybody in the building without the limitation of space.
Sure, absolutely. Yes. So then the next question would be, and it probably is more for Mr. Barowie and staff, is to be looking at some co-location options. And when you're doing your analysis, include charter campuses. I think these are discussions we've had before, but if we're able to get them off of the rent paying business at their current charter, then that's a staff decision, but serving more students, then we could come back as a board and look at that. Just, I would like to see those 2 things different, because we may be able to do one without doing the other at the same time, is the only reason I ask those questions.
Okay, Dr. French.
So Mr. Barowie mentioned that there are expenses to using one of our buildings, and would it be possible to provide some kind of analysis based on what they're requesting, so they have an idea of what those costs would be? Just if you a number of classrooms, I know it would be a guesstimate, but it might help, if it's less than what they're paying now, or even if it's not much less, but they're actually able to get all their students in classrooms every day, it might be worth it to them, but I don't know if that's.
So there's 3 levels of analysis involved here, and each of them takes an extended period of time. The first is, how many schools have rooms? That's the easiest analysis. The second is, what other configurations have to take place to go with that? A separate entrance, shared facilities like the gym and the cafeteria. There's another level of detail. And then there's converting that level of detail into a cost. So that was why my first question was high school, middle school, elementary. That would narrow down our focus significantly. The second level to the board is, what level of detail do you want me to provide initially? I would really be concerned with having the staff run through a lot of scenarios only to find those schools are not accommodating and they won't work. Again, we're taking away from other work of the district. So it's really up to you on how much level of detail you want me to go through, but there is an impact on looking at more and more schools as an option. So
Okay, Miss Darby.
Yeah, so just I'm following up on that question. Mr. Bro, could a school like Greg Mathis, could they be located on an co-located on an elementary campus or not? Just because they're a high school?
physically they could, but I wouldn't recommend that. We don't have any K-12 campuses here.
Okay. So based on what I hear people saying and what you were saying, it seems to me, and what Ms. Henriquez is saying, is that perhaps waiting till you all get November data so you have a better idea on what space might be available. And then I wondered, without exerting too much staff time, if somebody might be able to help the Greg Mathis administration, really scrub their numbers to see, because I know their original request was 50 rooms, and that probably is going to be a hard number to accommodate, but maybe looking at some models that we're using, maybe getting those numbers down might be a possibility. So that's another reason I would say go with the November data on what your school number, school space is.
Okay. All right. Miss Green, and then Miss Coates, and then Miss Hederick, and then Dr. French, and see if you can remember that.
No, I was actually just gonna say, would make the recommendation also that we use the data from the November analysis to make a determination of what we've got available, since that's forthcoming, and the principal has said that, she doesn't want to do anything in a year.
Okay.
I would concur with that.
Okay. All right. Next.
So, and I agree. I think the November analysis, and there are some other charter school spaces. I mean, we've got some schools that are now using non-traditional campuses. So Jeff, I think what you're hearing is, I don't think any of us are saying elementary school, but certainly consider all the campuses other than that. And that includes some of these charter schools that exist, because co-location with the amount of price for dirt in Charleston County is going to have to be the future of some of these smaller schools. And this has absolutely nothing to do with Greg Mathis, because I have said we need to do this analysis, but I would point out my only small concern is we created these career technology buildings to have career technology classes. And about 30 minutes ago, we received data that shows that CCSD lags behind the state in the number of students that are receiving state CTE certifications. And we lag behind the state in work-based learning. Given that these are $50 million buildings, we need to be using them. If we were exceeding the state, that'd be a different story, but to be behind the state and have space in a building that's not doing a career technology service, I'm going to have issues with that, just because we agreed to let y'all build them because you agreed that space was necessary. And that's just a small caution. It in no way affects them because it's only 5 classrooms. So 5 classrooms for CTE and in a district that is lagging behind the state is 5 opportunities to do something better.
Okay. Next.
Okay.
All right.
I just wanted to second what Ms. Darby said, but I do think it would be better in terms of staff time for a first pass to look at high schools, to limit it to the high school campuses. And if there's really nothing, then make the determination whether to go look at middle school campuses.
I actually do after her.
Okay,
That's all.
Dr. Frazier.
I want to just reiterate that I attended the meeting with her staff and the board, and Kristen Graziano was there. And she was just enthralled that you all were providing a valuable service for students, and that she would be willing to work with your graduates for placement in her program to make sure that they could work with those students to prepare them for careers in law enforcement. So you do have a partner that's ready to wrap their arms around you to accommodate the students that you face through your program. And I would like to just thank this board for cooperating with them, because those students are students who have chosen to come back to school. non-traditionally and say, I want my education. Can you help me? They provide their own transportation. So location would be paramount to getting them re-engaged in the educational system. So just thank you. And thank you, Mr. Boyd, for just working with us so that we could work all of the details out to make sure that we capture all of our students.
Okay. Ms. Hedrick?
You have 60 students currently. How many are taking e-classes or online? Mhm.
I'm sorry, 6. Well, actually, as of this morning, I had 69.
Okay.
And of that, I have 11 currently slated for e-classes for multiple reasons, not necessarily.
Okay. And they do provide their own transportation.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I believe we've exhausted that item, 6B. Item 6C is I believe we only have one item that's going to go to potential consent, and that's item 5A. Am I correct?
Reverend Mac, the online agenda has shifted on screen to put the 5-year student outcome goals and the board governance, both of which were information items. They should not be moving to potential consent. I don't know how they got on there.
No, 5A. I just said 5A.
I know, but I'm looking at the computer screen of the action item you're fixing to do a motion on, and mine has 3 items, and I want to make sure that we don't inadvertently put those 3 to potential consent.
Got it. I believe, yeah.
Maybe
So
you need, do you see it on yours?
I do see it now.
Okay, so somebody's
Yep.
added items, and those are actually were information.
Yeah, so yeah, as I cited, I'm just item 5A, 2%.
Reverend Matt,
Yes,
excuse me, sir. So that we won't get lost, because we don't know how this is going to look later on. Do we need to make a decision as to when Mr. Brewery will get back with us on the Greg Mathis? Is there a timeline? I'd like to see that.
so because that item was listed as information, there's no action. However, we can make a recommendation to the superintendent if this information can be shared back to the
I think it's
board
pretty clear.
at the next potentially. I don't know how much time is allotted,
November
but very
board, in
soon.
the November timeframe.
And then is that what we suggested
After the analysis.
after the analysis from November?
The school input is due in November.
Got it.
Second week in November.
Okay. All right. So thereafter, if an update can be given to the board at that time. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right. So again, just for clarification, item 5A is the only item that's moving to potential consent. Is that accurate?
Yep. Can I make a motion?
Sure.
I move to move item 5A and 5A only to the potential consent agenda for the August board meeting.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Darby, second by Ms. Hedrick. Are there any questions? Thank you, Ms. Coates, for that clarification. All hearing none. We'll ask that you please cast your vote. Okay, that item passes. Upcoming meeting will be right after this committee of the whole will be a special call meeting. And of course, our 2 meetings in September, the 12th and the 26th, 12th being the committee of the whole, 26th being a regular board meeting.
We do the 22nd.
I'm sorry.
Isn't there a board meeting on August 22nd?
Yes.
A regular meeting?
There is, yes. It's just not listed here, but there is. Okay, entertain a motion for adjournment.
Can I ask a question? Should I just stay on this Zoom, or is there a separate Zoom for the special call meeting?
Same.
Just stay here. All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. All right, this committee of the whole is officially adjourned. We will resume the special call meeting at 4 p.m. All right, item 3A. You know me, I'm on time.
Reverend Mac, you're going back. Oh, okay, here we go.
Thank you. All right. All right, we'll now reconvene back into open session. Item 5A, student placement appeal. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Wait,
Is there a second?
Are we up to uphold the constituent board decision?
Yes, sir. Ma'am.
Second.
second.
All right, moved by Ms. Cole, second by Ms. Hedrick. Are there any questions? Hearing none, rest of you please cast your vote. Dr. Frazier? Come on, Dr. Frazier.
I thought I heard. Sorry about that.
And you.
She's packing her bags.
Okay, that motion passes. Item 5B. Is there a motion?
Move.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Motion, go ahead, sir.
Motion to approve the exchange student attending RB Stall High School for the school year.
Okay, moved by Ms. Green, second by Ms. Waters. Are there any questions? Hearing none, we ask that you please cast your vote. Dr. Frazier,
Yes, you already voted.
you already voted?
It says right there, change vote.
Ms. Darby?
Yes, I thought I voted too, but.
Okay, that item passes. Item 5C.
I have a motion.
Okay,
I move to approve the out-of-county enrollment request with no tuition for the student's family, but to follow up with the release of any funds from Colleton County.
okay, is there a second to that motion?
I would second if it is specific to the 22-23 school year.
Yes, please add that.
Excuse me, somebody dropped something in the middle of that.
Okay.
Yes.
So she's
I
moving.
move to approve.
Bill Brigman. I'm gonna call them out. Go ahead.
The out-of-county enrollment request with no tuition,
To the family.
no tuition to the family.
Mhm.
Follow up with
Colleton County on the release of any funds for the 22-23 academic year.
Okay, Ms. Coates, second
Yes.
that motion. Are there any questions to the motion? You had a question, Ms. Darby?
No, I'm sorry, my bad.
Okay. Please cast your vote.
I vote yes.
Okay. Are we waiting on anyone? Not Frazier, no. That motion passes. Item 5D, is there a motion?
I have a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to vote to move that we reinstate Dr. Erica Taylor to her position.
Moved by Ms. Waters, second by Ms. Hedrick. Are there any questions?
No.
I'm sorry, Ms. Coakley. Moved by Ms. Waters, second by Ms. Coakley. Are there any questions? Hearing none, we ask that you please cast your vote. Are we waiting on anyone, Julie?
Ms. Darby?
Mr. Darby?
I vote no.
Okay. Okay, that motion fail. Item 6A. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that the attached, assuming that y'all have done your homework and reviewed the projects over $250,000, I motion that they be approved.
Okay.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Green, second by Ms. Coates. Are there any questions?
Did you get that, Julie?
I'm sorry.
I was nothing. I was just making a side comment.
Okay. All right. Hearing none, we ask that you please cast your vote.
I vote yes. It's not popping up on board docs.
Okay.
Did she say yes?
Yes, Ms. Darby voted yes. Okay, motion passed. Item 7A. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the second reading of changes to policy EBBA. Should I read out all the alphabet soup?
No, it's listed unless you're changing the recommended action.
I am not.
Okay, is there a second?
Or, well, can we second and then?
I'll second it. Do we need a second? I'll second it.
All right, I moved by Dr. French, second by Ms. Darby. Are there any questions? Hearing none, what? I'm sorry, go ahead.
So just to clarify, if DHEC changed their mind tomorrow and wanted to reinstate masks, what would it mean for?
I believe that this policy would require the staff to follow that recommendation. However, I don't expect that to happen. So.
All right, any further questions?
So my only question would be, that's a minimum. Is anything in this policy prevent staff from implementing a mask policy above the recommendations of, I don't see there's anything that says they can't recommend something not mandated by the CDC.
Well, it does say that.
This policy will allow the superintendent
To make that decision
make that decision.
above the CDC and the DHEC recommendations.
Yes.
I guess that is possible. It does say that we're,
No, it's not possible. It's accurate. I mean, that's superintendent, this policy would allow that.
okay, let me see. Let me look at the red line real quick. if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I was looking at the background, which I know is not necessarily language in the policy.
Right.
All right,
Okay, it does say that the district will continue to revise and update its protocols, including all the mitigation strategies in accordance with policy changes through US CDC and US OSHA and DHEC, SCDHEC. I don't really see where it's giving the superintendent authority to leave those recommendations. That would be like saying that our district would require vaccinations for a disease that's not on the vaccination list for DHEC. So it's at that level that I think, sure, it's possible, but I don't think
So
that's what
I don't think
the
that's where we're
intent.
headed, but that's one of the reasons that you are very specific and it's very important how you write policies. And I asked the superintendent in our last meeting, to which he affirmed, by placing this, and it's the red line that you didn't say, administrative rule EBBA-R.
Mhm.
Administrative rules are 100% within the district's superintendent authority.
Yes.
So while I don't know that it will happen, there's nothing in this policy that prevents it from happening. And that was just something I wanted to make sure we were clear on.
All right. Is there any other questions? Hearing none, rest that you please cast your vote. Ms. Darby, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Okay. Ms. Darby vote yes.
That fails.
Wow.
444. We've been down that road before, right?
So that fails.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means that policy ADD is still on the books and that we're not changing any of our policies.
Not changing.
That
any
vote
of-
means just what it says, that this second reading fails.
Right, so ADD is still in place.
What I would really like to do is kind of revisit the conversation, just because there's just some concern around if we have a very serious issue like we have had before, and there's no.
Can I see the
intervention,
vote? The vote went away. I'm sorry.
And there's no intervention. I just think we should revisit what all of these things mean and whether or not it really is giving the superintendent the authority to do above and beyond whatever.
It would be a very simple fix in that he or she follows directly the CDC and DHEC. And I think that's why we would have, Dwayne, we're putting you to work. Would that cover it, that the policy is written? I think Courtney's talking about how do we word the policy so that it protects it. If the policy says they are only allowed to follow DHEC and CDC, then they're only allowed to follow what that says. So I think it's a very simple fix in that you can insert a couple of words and make that clear.
So I just want to make sure, because we've been down this road before, does the vote reflect everyone's intention before we move on?
I am supportive of having, can I speak? Or
Yes.
I am supportive of like putting this on the agenda for the next board meeting.
Actually,
after some
I
discussion.
think you could make a motion that adds a word to the reading. Dwayne, could there be another motion made since this one failed?
And also, we have not moved on to the next item. So the existing motion is still on the
Lauren, if
floor.
there is a motion that y'all would like to craft.
Generally, you make, yeah, that's.
But the only question I would have for you as the parliamentarian, because yes, when a motion fails, you can always make them, it's the old rules. We failed to buy green computers. I make a motion to buy blue ones. But because this is a second reading, could we?
Second reading, technically, if you change the verbiage, it's the first reading.
Right.
Because it's not the
Oh,
second reading.
that's why I was asking you. But
Okay.
if we did that, we could make a motion for a first reading today that would pass first reading and be able to be on an agenda for a second reading in the very near future.
I'm
You
so
see where I'm
sorry
going,
that we
Lori?
didn't talk about this earlier, because the reason it was on this agenda today is that staff asked for it to be moved up from the regular board meeting, so it would be taken care of before school started.
Oh, I'm not questioning why it was on the agenda. I'm saying.
Well, I'm just saying, but now it's going to take longer, and so I'm a little.
Well, there were quite a bit of public comments with
Yeah.
concerns around this policy today specifically.
Oh, I didn't hear those brought up during the public comment
You have
section.
Well, we're responsible for reading them.
Right.
But you didn't even mention it.
So that, I don't think that's here or there, but if
Okay.
I understand, so here's where we are, and I understand your concern, Dr. French, that you wanted this to pass today and staff clearly wanted some clear direction today.
Right.
That's not happening.
Okay.
That motion failed. So we do have an option to expedite the next steps, which I just hinted as
So
loud as I
is-
could.
So everyone just settle down for a moment. So is there a new motion? That's where we're
Yes,
at.
yeah, let me see.
So we
So
don't need
shall
to
we
make
just-
up a new motion. This motion has failed. We can move on and just revisit
I think
it
that,
all together.
I think that what I'm feeling is that prudence and careful consideration might be a little bit better than throwing something up there right now.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Maybe it needs to be vetted a little bit more. Okay? All right.
Do we have the ability, though, at some point after looking at this policy, because I don't want to wordsmith right now either, to go into a first policy or first reading at the next board meeting?
Repeat that again, please.
So if we are able to have time to review the policy, tweak some of the words, are we able to support Dr. French in getting a first reading at the next board meeting?
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah, we don't necessarily have to go through Cal, is what you're saying.
yes, we can.
Okay.
All right. I'm sorry, Ms.
Just for clarity on my part, so if the first reading is August 22nd,
Which means school would start.
and then so the approval of the policy would be wherever the board meeting is in September. So between August 17th and whenever that board meeting in September, if there's a need to talk about and make a decision about instituting math within schools, that's going to be the board's decision.
Policy ADD.
In first reading, could we not? We've done that before.
But we can't suspend it after we already voted on it.
You can't suspend it today because it's not on the agenda.
Okay.
But the next agenda, y'all could put suspension of this
Right.
policy, and then you can move along and not have to go through all those steps.
So in all essence, I mean, we really don't have to wait until the 22nd. I can call a special call board meeting. We can take care of that if we want to do that before the special, before school starts, period. So.
You got that, Dwayne?
So we can do that.
Get it on.
All right, so we can have a clean start before school start. I'll converse with the superintendent and then we'll go from there. All right, we're at item 8A, entertain a motion for adjournment.